During the 1600s, many people wanted to go to America, but they did not have enough money to pay for the ride over. Although there was another way you could get to America without paying any money. It was called indentured servantry. Indentured servantry was when a person who lived in America would pay for your ride over, but when you got to America, you would have to do contracted work as a servant for that person for a certain amount of years. In exchange for their services, their travels were paid for. They also received food, clothing, and shelter once they arrived in the colonies. These slaves got their name from indentured, meaning a legal contract that covers a debt or purchase obligation, and a servant was a person that performed tasks for other people. Poor people took advantage of this opportunity in order to travel to the New World expense-free. Indentured servants first arrived in America in the decade after the settlement of Jamestown, established by the Virginia Company in 1607. They were first offered the option to come to America because of the need for cheap labor and to work in the fields. Another reason why they were coming to America was because the sponsors who paid for their voyages were promised 50 acres of land per person they paid for. Although they were servants, it was not fully slavery. They had some rights in their favor. When they first arrived, these men or women signed a contract that stated that they agreed to work for a number of years in exchange for transportation to the New World. Adults served under contract typically for 4 to 7 years. Meanwhile, children could work for much longer. Some people broke the law. Some things that were considered against the law for indentured servants were running away or getting pregnant while still under their contract. One of the punishments for breaking the law was having their contracts extended. In exchange for them working for several years, the indentured servants received a free transatlantic passage over to America, the ability to eventually become free, and they were eventually granted freedom dues. Freedom dues included land, money, food, guns, and more. Many of these men and women were single because the low life expectancy. Because most people did not live long enough to find their significant other, there were very few families. And even those marriages only lasted a couple of years due to the fact that people died at such a young age. Barely anyone knew or lived to become a grandparent because nobody lived for that long. The harsh living conditions were also a factor to the reason people did not live for a very long time. Diseases like malaria, dysentery, and typhoid were very easily spread because people were not immune to them. Their population grew very slowly through immigration. Men outnumbered women 6 to 1. Women were essential to the economy at this time, especially because of the gap in the number of men and women. The most important role of women at this time were to reproduce. Half of the people born in Virginia and Maryland did not live till 20. The other half of people lived till they were about 14 or 15 years old. Tobacco was the most popular cash crop, but prices soon began to decrease due to the enormous production of tobacco. Growing tobacco was ruining the soil, which was creating a demand for new land. Chesapeake Bay played a huge role in tobacco shipping. The Chesapeake Bay was a place where leaf-laden ships annually hauled about 1.5 million pounds of tobacco. There were many indentured servants working on the tobacco field because these people were cheap and got the work done, unlike African slaves that were too expensive. The headright system was a grant of land, usually 50 acres, given to settlers in the 13 colonies. Virginia and Maryland employed the headright system to encourage the importation of servant workers. Whoever paid the passage of a laborer received the right to acquire 50 acres of land. Masters reaped the benefits of land ownership from the headright system. If an indentured servant lived to see the end of their contract, most of them fled to other colonies to start building wealth of their own. Some returned to the country where they came from. Others were given servants of their own to farm land, or where they were given their own land to farm. Indentured servantry ended in 1827 by acts passed by the American and British governments declining the use of indentured servants.